Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Alicia Watley.
I'm Mike Broad.
And I'm Michele Hunter, Coverage Counsel at PLRB.
Yay, Michelle's back again.
Michele is back. Welcome
back. By popular demand, yes.
Yay.
Michele, what's the scenario?
Okay, here's the scenario. An Italian restaurant has hired a plowing service to clean snow and ice from their parking lots like most restaurants do. And it's a particularly busy night in December. Snow is falling. It's very picturesque. However, the plow truck is falling behind. Before the service can actually plow and salt the lot, a family of 6 people parks in the insured parking lot to celebrate a big birthday dinner.
Yay.
Cannoli and everything. So as the grandmother gets ready to exit the car, she slips and falls and breaks her hip.
Ouchie.
It's bad. So it results, instead of the restaurant, a trip to the hospital. And then this injured woman decides to sue the restaurant. And the insured restaurant does have a commercial general liability policy, but the insured restaurant, for whatever reason, does not report this lawsuit for 6 months to the insurer. And by that time, this injured woman has already obtained a judgment against the insured restaurant.
How? They're too busy cooking fine Italian cuisine to deal with lawsuits.
Lost track of time. That's exactly right.
Right.
People trip and fall, slip and fall all the time.
Right.
Yes, they do.
Grandma should be at home anyway.
Yeah, she's maybe too old to be out there. Maybe she had a walker. We don't know.
Hey, so I'm getting older. I'm offended by those statements. We need
You're only offended because it's true.
I know.
Well, she didn't get any cannoli that day. She had to go to the hospital, and the hospital food's not nearly as good as the Italian restaurant. So that was no fun.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
So how does we live in a snowy area. What is your strategy for walking across snowy or icy conditions as not to slip and fall?
I say don't skate on thin ice. I think you should have like ice skates or boots or something. And perhaps just people holding your arm if you're, people should hold your arm if it's your birthday dinner anyway. So that's what I would recommend.
You can fall together. Yeah.
Everybody.
Also, let's hurt everybody at the same time.
Right. Take everybody out. Why not?
Then everybody has to go to the hospital.
Exactly.
Yes. Right.
So I'd like to do what I call the, now that I'm older, the old man shuffle, the little, kind of like a little ice skating thing where you just go about 1 inch and try to keep your bad balance and not fall. But
sure, it takes you 15 minutes to enter the restaurant, but you didn't break anything on the way.
And hopefully it's not uphill or I'll never make it. Oh.
Exactly. Poor lady.
Yeah. My strategy is basically just step as gingerly as possible.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So let's go into the hypothetical here. Or what is the wording of the CGL policy's notice of provision?
That's what we have to look at. That's like the first thing we look at. And there are typically 3 different types of wordings to these notice provisions, which is what they're called in a CGL policy. Sometimes it's immediate notice. Sometimes it's notice as soon as practicable. And then sometimes it's prompt notice. So a lot of those 3 phrases are interpreted pretty much the same way. And they look at it from a reasonableness factor or standard in terms of analyzing those notice provisions. But it is important to note that this is an important policy provision. And if it's actually breached by the insured, then that actually gives the insurer the right to deny coverage.
Okay.
So you would think with a lawsuit that comes in, you'd want to get you're insured to report that thing right away because it's kind of a very important piece of paper.
And even before getting a lawsuit slapped on you, you might want to tell your insurer, hey, we had a slip and fall in the parking lot. I want to put you on notice of that because I don't know what she's going to do. And so, in this case, kind of worst case scenario because she sues. But that, gives the insurer opportunity to sort of mitigate the risk of that. And so, of course, that didn't happen in this scenario, because the insured waited, 6 months. And by that time, it's too late.
So true. Now we know, Michelle, was some state where
Mhm.
there's snowy weather in December, so that's probably
How
maybe
about
40 out of the 50 states. But what state are we talking about here?
well, right here in Illinois, that's what we're talking about.
Oh, yay,
Beautiful
sweet
4
home,
seasons in
Illinois.
Illinois. Yes, we love those. And it was a beautiful night of snow. It's just not fun if you're on the ground with it. But yeah, we'll say it's Illinois. And that is an important question, Mike, because notice provisions are interpreted differently in different states. And there's different scenarios and factors and things that the courts look at. So you definitely want to know, hey, where did this notice provision potentially get breached in? What state was that? And how does a state look at that particular question? So, like, for example, in Illinois, they look at a number of factors. And the first one, just what we went over, the actual policy wording of the notice provision. They also look at how sophisticated the insured is. Do they understand policy language? Are they, what is the level of sophistication when it comes to insurance policies? That's a factor.
I'm
Then
but a
also,
chef. What do I know about these strange legal things, right?
what if this chef is, you know, older, straight from Italy, doesn't speak much English? His son got him, procured this policy for him. And so he's just kind of like threw it in a drawer and never looked at it.
Right.
That's something a court takes a look at. And they also look at the diligence that the insured has in terms of reporting it. Now, arguably here, not any diligence at all, because there was a failure to report until, after the fact, after this default judgment that the poor injured lady was able to obtain. And so he's not going to do too well on the diligence factor.
Well, it's
But
the
when it comes,
holidays, Michelle.
well,
Busy.
it
It's
is
a
a holiday. What
rush.
is it?
Lots of
There-
exactly. Nobody sues over the holidays. It's not fair.
Are you sure?
She's just mad she didn't get that cannoli. So she's like, that's it. You're going to pay for cannolis for the rest of your life.
That
So
might have been
yeah,
the thing that,
She just wanted to own the restaurant. It's fine.
that's right. Exactly. With the type of amount that she probably obtained, maybe that could happen. You never know. That's why these notice provisions are so important. And another factor that is really important when it comes to these basically reasonableness tests is prejudice, because some states require the insurer to show prejudice in order to deny coverage, and then some states do not. So let's take a poll in Illinois. Who thinks Illinois requires prejudice, and who thinks they don't?
I'm with yes.
Yes. Okay.
I was going to say yes first, but
Beat you to it. All right, I changed. I'm going to say
what
no.
happened to ladies first, Mike?
Right, sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Ladies first. Exactly. Okay, so we have a no and a yes, and I'm the tiebreaker, right? Then.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, perfect. So I should feel like there should be a drum roll or something. Illinois does not require prejudice.
Yay! I was right, Alicia. See? You wanted to go with your yes, and I gave it to you. No, I was
good
right.
try.
That's fine.
That's okay. You know what? If we were in
Remember,
a different
I'm the
state,
layperson here. You guys know more than I do.
that's exactly right. And you know what? Had I asked about a different state, then you would have been right, because there are states that require it. But actually, for Illinois, it's only one of the factors that they consider, and so it's not determinative or dispositive of the issue. And so, maybe let's say in our situation, let's say somehow the insurer found out about this accident, not through the insured, through some third party who witnessed it, and then is friends with the adjuster, let's say, who, gave the policy to the insured restaurant. Then what? What do you think in terms of a prejudice argument? Do you think that the insurer should say, well, you didn't tell me, I knew about it, but you should have told me?
Right.
Then what?
I think that would be a tough argument to make, Michelle.
Mhm.
Yes.
What do you think? Same thing, Alicia?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you don't require prejudice, then it's, if you require prejudice, then it's a little harder. But, one thing in this case that the insurer can definitely say is that, yeah, I'm absolutely prejudiced because there was a lawsuit and a default judgment, and we couldn't defend it. We couldn't answer the complaint. We had our hands were tied. We didn't even know about it. So right there, that's pretty good evidence of prejudice on the part, of the insurer. If a lawsuit's already been handled and, judgment entered.
So even in Illinois, Michelle, would that still be a factor to come into play, even though you don't have to show prejudice. You could at
Absolutely.
least
They
say,
look
hey,
at
we had no chance to defend this thing. It was
we had
already.
no chance to defend it. And that usually is how these insurers are able to deny claims based on these breaches of notice provisions, is like if there's a judgment entered. Sometimes they say, you know what, you waited so long and we can't find any witnesses. We can't investigate this claim. Our ability to even look into it is totally compromised now. And that's with or without a judgment even entered. And so these are all the factors that a court in Illinois and really every other state would just look at in the particular claim to see if prejudice happened or not. And so, yeah, in this case, that's pretty clear cut. But if there wasn't a judgment entered and let's say the insured restaurant assumed, well, my insurance isn't going to cover this, and
Right.
why bother?
It's a snowplow. It's their
It's a
fault.
snowplow. I'm going to go after him. It's his fault, not mine.
Exactly.
I did my due diligence in hiring, somebody to clear the parking lot.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so what's the insurer going to say to that? They're going to say, it doesn't matter. You're our insured. The contract is between you and I, not the third party snowplow. And so it's between you and I whether or not you breached the policy.
So do we even know what the insured's excuse was for not providing notice here, Michele?
Well, no, we don't. But we can take numerous guesses, some of which might be, like I said, more acceptable than others. Let's do say that he doesn't speak English. He's Italian. Nobody was, explaining to him what the insurance policy meant. His son got it for him and he lives out of state. He never even took a second look at it. That affects the sophistication of the insured. And so that's something a court would look at. But if he is aware of the policy and knows what he's doing and just completely dropped the ball, because like Mike said, he's cooking spaghetti and he's too busy. If that happens, then that's not going to, fall too well in his favor. It's going to favor the insurer's side of it.
He could have just been lazy.
That happens a lot. And those are harder to defend than from the insured side. And it's interesting with these different courts and jurisdictions, there's no bright line rule. There's courts out there that say 3 months was too long, and that's a breach. But then there's been other courts that have said 24 months, like 2 years is okay because, just different types of circumstances. In one case, there was a case where the insured was told by the adjuster, we're probably not going to be able to cover that. And so he relied on that. And then 2 years later, it was like, what?
Oopsies.
And so the court, though, and that was actually an Illinois case. The court basically was like, no, that's excused delay because you had a reasonable assumption, basically, based on what the adjuster said that coverage wasn't going to be offered.
Fascinating. The court.
So
Who knows?
They look at all the different factors and all of the different circumstances that explain the delay. And, maybe in this case, let's say the woman serves the man papers and he never sees him. An employee is working at the restaurant. He never gets the actual summons of the complaint, or he never actually sees it. And then he gets this default judgment in the mail, and then he's surprised. He has no idea. That's all stuff that a court would look at as well. And so it gets that specific, in terms of the actual factual situation around why was notice so delayed.
It could be many reasons.
Yeah, there could. And like you said, it could be laziness. It could be lack of knowledge of what insurance does. Now, typically, lack of knowledge of your own policy is not a very good defense because you're supposed to know if you enter a contract, like what you're signing and what it means. So that's not usually a very good defense. But if it is a situation, like I said, where he's just so unsophisticated in that kind of a thing, that the court will look at that.
Or the sauce was burning.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a sauce
We
emergency.
had people to feed.
Right.
Yeah, well, and when you think about that, people are busy these days. And so I think the moral of the story is that, if anybody slips and falls, if anything bad happens, one of the first calls you need to really be making is to your insurance agent, and just to let them know that, hey, this happened and I want to put you on notice of it, because then they can start looking into what happened.
Right.
And maybe had the insurance company got involved earlier, they could have settled, lifetime can only supply or something. Who knows?
And
Free meals
going
forever.
going back
Free-
to the scenario,
Oh,
the guy may not even known that there was a slip and fall.
good
Like they
point.
didn't even make it into the restaurant.
Oh, that is a very good point. That is a very good point. Yeah, they might have just taken her right to the hospital, never gone inside. He checks off a reservation that never appeared.
Mhm.
Life goes on.
Mhm.
That's a very distinct possibility. Those are all very good coverage questions because, if he wasn't on notice of it and then never saw the lawsuit, how would he know? He
Or
wouldn't.
even saw the lawsuit and said, nobody slipped and fell in my place.
What do you,
I
no
never
one
saw
That was the
that.
night the great spaghetti burn. I remember that night.
I
Nobody
have the
slipped and
cameras
fell.
out on the security, like my security cameras don't show anybody falling.
Ooh,
Mhm.
good point.
Or
Mhm.
sometimes you get stuff in the mail that may looks almost legitimate, but isn't
Mhm.
quite legitimate. Maybe thought it was a scam.
There you go. I mean, there are a lot of false attempts to scare people thinking that, ooh, if you don't pay your iPass, you're going to go to jail. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people do get in the mail. And so you could see where he might be like, oh, toss it. You never know.
Right.
All right, so Michele, what can we take away from this scenario?
Well, first, you want to know your jurisdiction because you want to know how a court will analyze this issue. Do they require prejudice? Do they not? If you're an insured, want to call your insurance company right away if something happens and not take a chance on it. Just don't take a chance. Make that your first response. And then 3, I say just don't skate on thin ice and don't go to Italian restaurants in the middle of winter if you're worried about falling. So
And just be extra careful.
just
Right.
be extra careful. Be extra careful because slip and falls happen all the time. And that's why they have these CGL policies. So, but yeah, that it's important to know where you're at and what the policy language is, and then to look at all the facts around it. You really have to do your due diligence of like, how did this late notice come about? Why? And ask all these different questions and analyze all these different factors.
So, Mike, where can an adjuster go to learn more?
Well, Alicia,
Yes.
since you're a veteran of these podcasts, you know where they can go. plrb.org, where all your
You
friends
don't have
are.
to ask the question.
I know, but we are your resource. And if you went out there and looked up stuff, you get cool things like a 50-state survey over late notice and how all the states look at late notice and the elements there. My favorite part was the commercial general liability policy annotation. So you can go in there and there's like specifically defined terms and other things that will link out to some court cases that will help you make cool decisions on your cases. That was always fascinating to me. We have coverage research as well and questions on if prejudice is required or not. There's a ton of stuff at plrb.org, so check it out. And Alicia, would you be kind
Yeah.
enough to share those in the show notes?
Another question you ask me every
I
single
know, but
time.
it's fun.
But yes, we can do links in the show notes. You can also find a recap of today's key points from this episode. You'll find links to our social media. You'll find information on how to submit your own adjuster story.
Ooh,
And don't
yay.
forget to subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We
Right,
want
5
good
stars.
ratings so we can provide more podcasts to all of you.
Yay. Well,
Yay.
thanks, Michele. That
Thanks,
was
Michele.
awesome.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back.
All right.
And to all our listeners, we'll see you next time.
Yay. Bye, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.